The rain lashed against the cobblestone paths of St. Aldrich's College, Oxford, turning the historic campus into a glistening, treacherous maze. Clara Moreau, a new student, stepped off the bus onto the university grounds, her black trench coat slick with water. At 22, she carried herself with a quiet intensity, her sharp green eyes scanning her surroundings like a predator assessing unfamiliar terrain. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and a single leather satchel hung from her shoulder. To anyone watching, she was just another fresher, nervous on her first day. But Clara was no ordinary student. She was a covert operative for Interpol, embedded at St. Aldrich's under a flawless alias to investigate a string of encrypted communications linked to the university. Her mission was classified, her true identity buried beneath layers of forged records. But today, her carefully constructed cover was about to be tested. The campus buzzed with the energy of a new term, students hurrying between Gothic buildings under umbrellas, their laughter muffled by the storm. Clara adjusted her earpiece, a discreet device synced to her secure phone, and made her way toward the lecture hall for her first class, Medieval European History. Her cover as a history student was perfect, unassuming, academic, invisible. But as she crossed the quad, a group of 5 young men lounging under the arched entrance of the old library caught her eye. They were loud, their voices carrying over the rain, their postures exuding the arrogance of those who believed they owned the place. "Oi, new girl!" one of them called, his voice dripping with mockery. He was tall, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smirk that screamed privilege. His name, Clara would later learn, was Julian Haverford, a third year with a reputation for trouble. His friends snickered, leaning against the stone wall, their eyes fixed on her. "Lost already, are we? Need a guide." Clara ignored them, her step steady, her expression neutral. She'd faced worse than university boys with inflated egos, armed smugglers in Marseille, corrupt officials in Prague, but she wasn't here to draw attention. She kept walking, her boots splashing through puddles, her mind focused on blending in. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Julian shouted, stepping into her path. His friends followed, forming a loose semicircle around her. The rain plastered his designer jacket to his shoulders, but he didn't seem to care. "What's the hurry, love? First day's supposed to be fun." Clara stopped, her jaw tightening. She tilted her head slightly, sizing him up. Julian was tall but lean, his confidence more bravado than substance. His friends, Rupert, Felix, Oliver, and Sebastian, as she'd later identify them, were cut from the same cloth, entitled, loud, and dangerously bored. She could disarm them in seconds if needed, but that wasn't the plan. "Not yet. I'm fine, thanks," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. She stepped to the side, intending to move past them, but Julian mirrored her movement, blocking her again. "Oh, come on," he said, his grin widening. "Don't be like that. We're just being friendly. What's your name? Eh? French by the accent? Trace Jolie, aren't you?" The others laughed, their voices grating. Rupert, a stocky brunette with a cruel glint in his eye, chimed in. "Bet she's one of those stuck-up types. Thinks she's too good for us." Clara's fingers twitched at her side, her training screaming at her to neutralize the threat. But she was Clara Moreau, history student, not Agent Moreau, Interpol's youngest field operative. She forced a tight smile. "I have a lecture to get to. Excuse me." She tried to step around them again, but Felix, a wiry redhead, grabbed her satchel strap. "What's in here, then? Secret diaries? Love letters?" He tugged, yanking her off balance. That was his mistake. Clara's reflexes kicked in before she could stop them. In one fluid motion, she twisted his wrist, forcing him to release the strap, and shoved him back just hard enough to make him stumble into Julian. The group froze, their laughter dying as they registered her speed, her precision. For a split second, Clara cursed herself. She'd revealed too much. But the moment passed, and Julian's smirk returned, though it was tighter now, less certain. "Feisty one, aren't you?" he said, stepping closer, his voice low and menacing. "You're gonna regret that, new girl." Clara met his gaze, unflinching. "Walk away," she said, her tone so cold it cut through the rain. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The threat hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. For a moment it seemed like Julian might back down. But then Sebastian, a lanky boy with a posh drawl, laughed, breaking the tension. "Oh, she's got a mouth on her. Let's see how tough she is by the end of the week." The group closed in, their taunts growing louder, more aggressive. They didn't touch her again, but their words were relentless. Crude remarks about her appearance, her accent, her attitude. Students passing by averted their eyes, unwilling to intervene. Clara's earpiece crackled faintly, her handler's voice faint but urgent. "Agent Moreau, stay calm. Do not engage." She wanted to rip the earpiece out. She wanted to teach these boys a lesson they'd never forget. But she had a mission, and losing her cover on day one wasn't an option. So she endured it, her face a mask of indifference, until the group finally tired of their game and sauntered off, laughing as they disappeared into the library. Clara stood there, rain soaking her coat, her heart pounding not from fear but from rage. She wasn't here to play victim. She was here to uncover a network of encrypted signals traced to St. Aldrich's, signals that suggested a conspiracy reaching far beyond the university's ivy-covered walls. But Julian and his crew had just made this personal. She pulled out her phone, not the burner she used for her cover, but the secure device hidden in a concealed pocket. She dialed a number she'd been instructed never to call unless absolutely necessary. The line rang once, twice, then connected. "Moreau," a gravelly voice answered. It was Director Elena Voss, her superior at Interpol, stationed in Lyon. "I need an escalation," Clara said, her voice low, controlled. "St. Aldrich's. I'm compromised." There was a pause. Then Voss's voice hardened. "Details." Clara glanced around, ensuring no one was close enough to hear. "Local students. Harassment. They're not a direct threat, but they're reckless. If they keep pushing, my cover's at risk. I need leverage to shut this down." "Shut what down?" Voss asked, her tone sharp. "The students or the mission?" "The university," Clara said, her words deliberate. "If I'm exposed, the whole operation collapses. We can't risk it." Voss was silent for a long moment. Clara could almost hear her weighing the options, calculating the fallout. "You're sure?" she finally asked. "They crossed a line," Clara said. "I'm making the call." "Do it," Voss said. "But you know what this means. Once it's done, there's no going back." Clara ended the call and dialed another number, this one local. It rang through to the office of Dr. Alistair Wren, Chancellor of St. Aldrich's. It was 9:47 a.m., and the office wouldn't be expecting her call. But Clara didn't care. The line clicked, and a secretary answered. "Chancellor's office. How may I help you?" "This is Clara Moreau," she said, her voice steady. "I need to speak to Dr. Wren. Now." "I'm sorry. The Chancellor is in a meeting." "Tell him it's about the saffron veil," Clara interrupted. "He'll take the call." There was a stunned silence, then a hurried transfer. Moments later, Wren's voice came through, clipped and cautious. "Miss Moreau, this is highly irregular. What's this about?" Clara took a breath, her eyes scanning the quad. "You have a problem, Dr. Wren. A group of students, Julian Haverford, Rupert Langley, Felix Drake, Oliver Thorne, and Sebastian Wells, are harassing new students. I was targeted this morning. It's not just about me. It's about what I know. The saffron veil. You know what that means." Wren's voice tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," Clara cut him off. "I know about the encrypted signals, the hidden accounts, the meetings in the restricted archives. I know enough to bring this university to its knees. Shut it down, Dr. Wren. Suspend operations, effective immediately, or I go public." "You're bluffing," he said, but there was a tremor in his voice. "Try me," Clara said. "You have 1 hour." She hung up, her heart racing. The rain had stopped, leaving the campus eerily quiet. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and headed toward the lecture hall, her mind already shifting to the next phase. The call had been made. The university's fate was sealed. But this was only the beginning. By noon, whispers were spreading across campus. Classes were canceled, students sent back to their dorms. The chancellor's office issued a vague statement about urgent safety concerns. Clara sat in the library, pretending to read, as her earpiece crackled with updates. The university was shutting down lock, stock, and barrel. And Julian and his friends? They had no idea what they'd unleashed. But Clara knew this was far from over. The saffron veil, whatever it was real, and her call had just put a target on her back. She'd exposed herself not as a student, but as a player in a game far bigger than St. Aldrich's. The legal storm was coming, and she'd need every ounce of her training to survive it. Clara sat in the shadowed corner of the St. Aldrich's library, her eyes fixed on a book she wasn't reading, her mind racing through the consequences of her call to Chancellor Wren. The library, usually a hive of rustling pages and whispered debates, was unnaturally still, the air thick with the weight of the university's sudden closure. Students had been herded out of lecture halls, their faces a mix of confusion and irritation, while faculty members scurried through the halls, clutching briefcases and muttering about unprecedented measures. Clara's secure phone, tucked inside her satchel, buzzed faintly with encrypted updates from Interpol. Director Voss's last message was curt. Hold position. Await fallout. Clara's fingers twitched against the book's cover, her training keeping her outwardly calm while her pulse thrummed with adrenaline. She'd expected resistance from Wren, perhaps a negotiation, but not this, an immediate campus-wide shutdown. It was too quick, too absolute, and that gnawed at her. The saffron veil, the cryptic term she'd thrown at Wren, wasn't just a bluff. It was a lead she'd uncovered in her covert investigation. A name tied to encrypted signals intercepted by Interpol. Signals that pointed to St. Aldrich's as a hub for something far darker than academic prestige. But she hadn't expected Wren to fold so fast. Either he was terrified, or he was hiding something massive. Outside, the rain had returned, a soft patter against the library's stained glass windows, casting fractured colors across the oak tables. Clara's earpiece crackled, and Voss's voice came through, low and urgent. Moreau, we've got movement. Local authorities have been alerted. Expect police presence by 1400 hours. Clara's jaw tightened. She hadn't anticipated law enforcement so soon. Her call was meant to pressure Wren, to flush out whoever was pulling the strings behind the veil. But it had set off a chain reaction she couldn't fully control. She glanced at her watch. 12:45 p.m. The campus was locked down, but Julian Haverford and his crew, Rupert, Felix, Oliver, and Sebastian, were still out there, oblivious to the storm they'd ignited by targeting her. She'd seen them earlier, swaggering toward the student union, laughing as if the shutdown was just a holiday. They didn't know she'd named them in her call to Wren. Didn't know they were now persons of interest in whatever investigation was about to unfold. Clara's cover as a history student was still intact, but it was fraying. She'd revealed too much in that confrontation, her speed, her strength, the way she'd twisted Felix's wrist with surgical precision. Julian's eyes had lingered on her, suspicious, and she knew he wasn't the type to let a slight go unanswered. She closed the book, a dry tome on medieval charters, and slipped it back onto the shelf. Her mission was to uncover the Veil's operations, not to dismantle the university, but the harassment had forced her hand. She couldn't afford to be distracted by petty bullies, not when the signals she'd traced suggested money laundering, or worse, trafficking, routed through St. Aldrich's financial systems. She stood, smoothing her trench coat, and moved toward the library's rear exit, where the restricted archives were housed. She needed answers before the police arrived, before her cover was blown wide open. The archives were her best lead, dusty ledgers and coded documents that hinted at the Veil's influence over the university's founding. As she descended the stone staircase, the air grew colder, the musty scent of old paper enveloping her. She flashed her student ID at the archive gate, the librarian barely glancing up, too rattled by the shutdown to care. Inside, the shelves loomed like silent guardians, their contents a puzzle Clara had only begun to unravel. She pulled a ledger from 1348, its pages brittle, and scanned for the symbols she'd found last week. Strange, looping glyphs tied to the veil. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have called, Clara. Walk away now or you'll be next." Her blood ran cold. The message wasn't from Interpol. It was unencrypted, local, and used her real name. Someone on campus knew who she was. She pocketed the phone, her mind racing. The veil wasn't just a historical footnote, it was active, watching her. She flipped through the ledger, her eyes catching a name. Alistair Wren, not the Chancellor, but an ancestor, listed as a keeper in 1348. The coincidence was too stark. She snapped a photo of the page with her secure phone, her hands steady despite the growing dread. Footsteps echoed above, heavy and deliberate, not the shuffle of a librarian. Clara slipped the ledger back and moved deeper into the stacks, her training taking over. She crouched behind a shelf, her breath shallow, as two figures appeared at the archive entrance. Julian and Rupert, their voices low but unmistakable. "She's in here somewhere," Julian hissed. "That little stunt this morning? She's not just some fresher. I saw her eyes. She's trouble." Rupert snorted. "What, you think she's the one who got the place shut down? Come on, mate." Julian's voice dropped, cold and certain. "I don't know how, but she's involved. And I'm gonna find out what she's hiding." Clara's fingers brushed the concealed knife in her boot. A last resort she hoped she wouldn't need. They were closer now, their shadows stretching across the floor. She had seconds to decide. Confront them, slip away, or escalate further. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "The veil sees all. Stop now or your family pays." Her heart stopped. Her family, her mother in Lyon, her brother in Paris, were under Interpol protection, untraceable. Or so she'd thought. The archives felt like a trap now, the walls closing in. She tapped her earpiece, whispering, "Voss, I've got a problem. Hostile elements in my location, and they know my name." Voss's response was immediate. "Extract now. Police are inbound. We'll handle the fallout." Clara didn't move. Extraction meant abandoning the mission, and she wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. She needed to know what the veil was, why Wren had shut down the university so fast, and how Julian and his crew were connected. The boys were almost upon her, their footsteps louder, their voices angrier. She slid the knife from her boot, its weight familiar in her hand, and prepared to move. But then, a siren wailed outside, sharp and piercing, cutting through the silence. The police had arrived early. Julian and Rupert froze, cursing under their breath, then retreated, their footsteps fading. Clara exhaled, her grip on the knife loosening. She stood, slipping the blade back into place, and moved to the archive's rear exit. The sirens grew louder, and her phone buzzed with a new message from Voss. "Chancellor's office is cooperating. Legal action initiated against Haverford and Associates. Stay low." Clara's lips curved into a grim smile. Julian and his friends thought they could intimidate her, but they'd picked the wrong target. Her call had set the university on a collision course with itself, and the legal storm was just beginning. She stepped into the rain, the sirens echoing behind her, and disappeared into the campus's shadows, her mind already planning her next move. The veil was watching, but so was she. Clara melted into the shadows of St. Aldrich's campus, her trench coat blending with the rain-soaked dusk as she moved silently toward the edge of the quad. The sirens had multiplied, their wails overlapping in a chaotic symphony that signaled the police were no longer just a presence but a force, swarming the university with an urgency that matched the weight of her call to Chancellor Wren. Her secure phone vibrated in her pocket, but she ignored it for now, her senses tuned to the environment. The campus, once alive with student chatter, was a ghost town, its Gothic spires looming like tombstones under the storm clouds. Clara's mind churned through the morning's events. The harassment by Julian Haverford and his crew, her calculated threat to Wren, the cryptic messages mentioning the saffron veil, and now the police, moving faster than she'd anticipated. Her call had been a tactical strike, meant to disrupt the veil's operations and protect her cover, but it had unleashed a maelstrom she hadn't fully predicted. The mention of her family in that last message, "Stop now or your family pays," had shaken her, a crack in her otherwise ironclad composure. Interpol had assured her that her mother and brother were untouchable, hidden behind layers of security in Lyon and Paris, but the veil's reach was longer than she'd imagined. She needed to know how they'd found her, and why Ren had crumbled so quickly under her threat. Slipping behind a stone archway near the student union, Clara crouched low, scanning for movement. The police were setting up a perimeter, their flashlights cutting through the rain, their radios crackling with orders. She tapped her earpiece, her voice a whisper. "Voss, I'm clear of the archives. Police are everywhere. What's the status on Haverford's group?" Director Voss's voice came through, clipped and tense. "They're in custody. Haverford, Langley, Drake, Thorne, and Wells. Picked up near the Union for questioning. Your call to Wren flagged them as instigators, but it's messy. The Chancellor's claiming a security breach, not harassment. He's covering something." Clara's eyes narrowed. "The veil." Voss paused, a rare hesitation. "We don't know. Wren's not talking, but the shutdown's drawn attention. Media's sniffing around, and local authorities are asking questions we can't answer without blowing your cover. You need to secure evidence before the police lock down the archives." Clara nodded to herself, her mind already mapping the campus. The restricted archives were her best shot at uncovering the veil's secrets, but returning now was risky with the police presence. She needed a diversion, something to pull attention away from the library. Her eyes landed on a maintenance shed across the quad, its door slightly ajar, a faint glow of emergency lights spilling out. An idea formed. She moved swiftly, staying low, and slipped inside the shed. It was cluttered with tools, a generator humming in the corner. Perfect. She rigged the generator's fuel line to overheat, setting a timer on her watch for 10 minutes. Enough time to cause a small, contained fire that would draw the police without endangering anyone. It was a calculated risk, but Clara was trained to bend chaos to her advantage. She exited the shed, her boots silent on the wet grass, and headed back toward the library. The rain masked her movements, but her heart pounded with the weight of the unknown. Who was behind the veil? How did they know her identity? And what did Julian and his friends have to do with it? They were troublemakers, sure, but their aggression felt too targeted, too personal. She reached the library's rear entrance, the same one she'd used to escape Julian and Rupert earlier. The door was still unlocked, a stroke of luck in a day that had been anything but. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old books and damp stone. She moved to the restricted section, her flashlight casting a narrow beam across the shelves. The ledger from 1348 was still where she'd left it, its pages marked with the strange glyphs and the name Alistair Wren. Proof that the Chancellor's family was tied to the veil centuries deep. She photographed more pages, her hands steady despite the ticking clock in her mind. The generator would go off soon, and she needed to be gone before the police swarmed the area. As she worked, her phone buzzed again, another unencrypted message. "You can't hide, Clara. The veil is eternal." Her stomach twisted. They were tracking her somehow, and they weren't subtle about it. She scanned the room, her training kicking in, searching for cameras, bugs, anything that could explain how they knew her every move. Nothing stood out, but the feeling of being watched was unshakable. She tucked the phone away and pulled another document, a 19th century journal mentioning Keepers of the Veil, a group tasked with protecting the Covenant. The words were vague, but the implications were chilling. Money, power, control, all funneled through St. Aldrich's for centuries. Her earpiece crackled again. "Moreau, the generator fire's been reported. Police are redirecting. You've got 5 minutes." Clara cursed under her breath. Voss was monitoring her through Interpol's satellite feed, but that didn't explain the Veil's messages. She grabbed one more document, a ledger from 1920 listing transactions to a shell company still active today, and slipped it into her satchel. She was halfway to the exit when she heard voices. Sharp, authoritative, not students. Police. They were already inside the library, faster than she'd expected. She ducked behind a shelf, her breath shallow, as flashlight beams swept the room. Check the archives, a male voice barked. Tip said someone's been tampering with restricted materials. Clara's blood ran cold. A tip? Someone had ratted her out, and it wasn't Julian's crew. They were in custody. She crouched lower, her mind racing through escape routes. The rear exit was too far, and the main entrance was crawling with officers. Her only option was the ventilation shaft she'd scouted during her initial recon. She moved silently, prying open the grate with her knife, and crawled inside, the metal cold against her palms. The shaft was narrow, but she was trained for tighter spaces. She inched forward, the distant wail of sirens growing louder as the generator fire drew attention. Her phone buzzed again, but she couldn't check it now. She emerged in a storage room, dusty and unused, and slipped out a side door into the rain. The campus was chaos. Police vans, flashing lights, students gathered at the perimeter, whispering about terrorism, scandals, conspiracies. Clara blended into the crowd, her hood up, her face obscured. Her earpiece buzzed with Voss's voice. "Evidence secured? Enough for now," Clara whispered. "But I'm compromised. They know my name, my family. I need extraction." Voss's response was grim. "Negative. You're too deep. The legal case against Haverford's group is moving forward. Harassment charges? But it's a smokescreen. Wren's pushing a narrative to protect the university. You need to find the veil's source before we pull you." Clara's jaw clenched. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a target. The police were closing in, the Veil was watching, and Julian's crew, though detained, wasn't the real threat. She glanced at her phone, the latest message glowing on the screen. "Run, Clara. You can't stop the Veil." She deleted it, her resolve hardening. The legal storm was brewing, and she'd started it with one call. But the Veil was bigger than St. Aldrich's, and she was running out of time to expose it. Clara crouched in the attic of the St. Aldrich's Chapel, a forgotten space above the ancient nave, where dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight piercing the cracked stained glass windows. The campus outside was a war zone of flashing police lights and shouting reporters. The university's shut down now national news, with headlines screaming about a security scandal and student misconduct. Clara's call to Chancellor Wren had spiraled into a public relations nightmare, but she hadn't anticipated the speed with which the Saffron Veil's influence would twist the narrative. Her secure phone, now on silent, burned with unread messages from Director Voss, each one a warning to stay hidden as Interpol scrambled to contain the fallout. Clara's cover as a history student was hanging by a thread. Julian Haverford and his crew were in custody, facing harassment charges, but the police were now hunting an unknown female student linked to the shutdown, a description too close to Clara for comfort. She'd slipped into the chapel after escaping the library's ventilation shaft, knowing it was one of the few places on campus not yet crawling with officers. Her satchel, heavy with photographed documents from the restricted archives, rested against her side, the evidence of the Veil's centuries-long grip on St. Aldrich's. The ledgers and journals she'd collected pointed to a network of power, financial transactions, coded messages, and names of keepers stretching from 1348 to the present, including an ancestor of Alistair Wren. But the latest message on her phone, received as she climbed into the attic, had upended everything. Your mother's safe house was compromised. Lion is no longer secure. Clara's chest tightened, her training barely holding back the panic. Her mother, Marie, was under Interpol protection, hidden in a Lion suburb, but the Veil had found her. The message wasn't a bluff. She'd cross-checked it with Voss, who confirmed a breach at the safe house, though Marie had been relocated in time. Clara's brother, Etienne, was still unaccounted for, his Paris apartment radio silent. The Veil wasn't just a university conspiracy. It was a hydra, its reach extending into her personal life, threatening everything she'd fought to protect. She adjusted her earpiece, her voice a hushed rasp. "Voss, I need intel on the Veil's local operatives. They're targeting my family. This isn't just about St. Aldrich's anymore." Voss's response was strained, the sound of typing in the background. "We're tracing the signals, but they're bouncing through multiple servers. The Veil's got tech we haven't cracked yet. Ren's office is cooperating with the police, but he's stonewalling us. He's named you as a disruptive element in a closed-door meeting. The harassment case against Haverford's group is moving forward, but it's a distraction. The real fight's in the archives. Clara's jaw clenched. Ren was playing both sides, protecting the Vale while throwing Julian and his friends under the bus. She opened her satchel, pulling out a crumpled journal from 1920, its pages detailing payments to a shell company called Saffron Holdings, still active according to her earlier scans. The company's name appeared in modern bank records tied to St. Aldrich's endowment, a thread she'd planned to unravel before the police locked down the campus. But now, with her family at risk, the mission had shifted. She needed to expose the Vale, not just for Interpol but to end the threat to her mother and brother. The chapel's wooden beams creaked above her, and she froze, her hand instinctively moving to the knife in her boot. The sound wasn't the wind, it was deliberate. A footstep. Someone was in the attic with her. She dimmed her flashlight, her senses sharpening, and slid behind a stack of old hymnals, her breath shallow. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and lanky, his silhouette unmistakable. Sebastian Wells, one of Julian's crew. He wasn't in custody. Clara's mind raced. Had he slipped the police, or was he released? His presence here wasn't a coincidence. He moved cautiously, a flashlight in one hand, a phone in the other, his voice low as he spoke into it. She's not in the dorms. I'm checking the chapel now. If she's got the documents, we're done. Clara's pulse quickened. Sebastian was working for someone, and it wasn't Julian. She tapped her earpiece, whispering, "Voss, I've got a hostile. Sebastian Wells in the chapel attic. He's not with the police. Confirm his status." Voss's voice crackled back. "Wells was released an hour ago. Lack of evidence. He's a loose end, Clara. Neutralize him, but don't kill him. We need answers." Clara's grip tightened on her knife. Neutralizing without lethal force was her specialty. But Sebastian's presence meant the Vale was closing in. She waited, her body coiled, as he approached her hiding spot. His flashlight beam swept past her, missing her by inches. She lunged, silent and swift, pinning his arm behind his back and pressing the flat of her blade against his throat. "Drop the phone," she hissed. Sebastian gasped, his flashlight clattering to the floor. "Who, Clara? How?" She tightened her hold, cutting him off. "Who are you reporting to? The Vale? Ren? Talk, or I carve my initials into you." Sebastian's bravado crumbled, his voice trembling. "I don't know what you're talking about. Julian told me to find you, said you're the reason we're in this mess. He's out too, they let us all go. Please, I'm just..." Clara didn't buy it. Julian's crew wasn't this organized. She twisted his arm harder, forcing a yelp. "Lie again and you're done. Who's running the Vale?" Sebastian's eyes darted, wild with fear. "I don't know names. They contacted me last week after you showed up. Said to watch you, report anything strange. I thought it was a prank." Clara's blood ran cold. The Vale had been onto her from day one. She released Sebastian, shoving him to the floor, and grabbed his phone. The screen showed a messaging app, unencrypted, with a single contact labeled Keeper. The latest message read, "Find her. End this." Clara pocketed the phone, her mind racing. Sebastian wasn't a mastermind, just a pawn. But his connection to the Vale was a lead she couldn't ignore. She bound his wrists with a zip tie from her satchel, gagging him with a strip of cloth. "Stay put," she warned, "or I come back for you." She climbed out of the attic, descending the chapel's spiral staircase, her heart pounding. The police were focused on the generator fire she'd set, but they'd be back soon. Her earpiece buzzed with Voss's voice. "Moreau, we've got a problem. The harassment case is falling apart. Ren's lawyers are spinning it as a misunderstanding, and Haverford's family is pulling strings. The Vale's covering its tracks. You need to get those documents to us now." Clara's resolve hardened. The legal case against Julian's crew was a sideshow, but it had bought her time. She slipped into the rain, heading for the old science building, a derelict structure where she'd stashed a backup transmitter. The documents in her satchel were her leverage, but transmitting them to Interpol meant risking exposure. As she moved, her phone buzzed with a final message. "You're too late, Clara. The Vale owns St. Aldrich's. Surrender or we take everything." She deleted it, her eyes burning with defiance. The legal storm was unraveling. Her family was in danger, and the Vale was steps ahead. But Clara Moreau wasn't done. She'd bring them down, even if it cost her everything. Clara stood in the abandoned science building, its crumbling lecture hall reeking of mold and neglect, the only sound the faint drip of rainwater through a shattered skylight. Her backup transmitter, a sleek device hidden in a rusted projector case, hummed softly as it uploaded the photograph documents from the restricted archives to Interpol's secure servers. The ledgers, journals, and bank records tied the Saffron Vale to St. Aldrich's for centuries, exposing a network of money laundering and influence peddling that reached into Europe's elite. But the upload was slow, and Clara's time was running out. The police had cordoned off the campus, their searchlights sweeping the grounds, while the media frenzy outside painted her as a rogue student who'd orchestrated the shutdown. Her call to Chancellor Wren had been a spark, but the Vale's retaliation, threats to her family, Sebastian's ambush in the chapel, had turned it into a wildfire. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Director Voss. "Upload confirmed. Extraction team en route. ETA 20 minutes. Stay alive, Moreau." Clara's eyes flicked to her watch. 3:17 a.m. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie silence that amplified every creak of the old building. Her mother was safe, relocated to a new safe house, and her brother Etienne had been found, unharmed, in Paris. But the Vale's messages still haunted her. The Vale owns St. Aldrich's. She'd left Sebastian tied up in the chapel attic, his phone a goldmine of leads, but his mention of a keeper suggested someone higher up was pulling the strings. Clara's instincts screamed that the real threat was still on campus. She checked the transmitter, 85% complete, when a floorboard groaned behind her. She spun, her knife drawn, and found herself face to face with Chancellor Alastair Wren. His silver hair glinting in the moonlight, a revolver in his trembling hand. "Miss Moreau," he said, his voice low but steady. "You've caused quite a mess." Clara's heart raced, but her training kept her calm. "Put the gun down, Wren. You're not a killer." His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You don't know what I am. The Vale has protected this university for centuries. You think you can dismantle it with a phone call?" Clara stepped back, keeping the transmitter behind her. "I've already sent the evidence. Interpol has everything, your family's name in the ledgers, the shell companies, the encrypted signals. It's over." Wren's eyes darkened, his grip tightening on the gun. "You're a child playing with forces you don't understand. The Vale isn't just St. Aldrich's. It's everywhere. Governments, banks, families like yours." Clara's stomach twisted at the mention of her family, but she held her ground. "Then why target me? Why not let me blend in?" Wren's face hardened. "Because you didn't. You walked in day one, and Julian's idiots picked you out. I told them to leave you alone, but they're reckless. Your little stunt with the fire, the call, it forced my hand." Clara's mind raced. Wren was admitting to being a keeper or at least complicit. The harassment wasn't random. Julian's crew had been sent to test her, to see if she'd break. She glanced at the transmitter, 92% complete. She needed to stall. "The police have Julian and his friends," she said. "They're facing charges. You can't cover this up." Wren laughed, a bitter sound. "Charges? Haverford's family owns half of Oxford. They'll walk by morning. The real problem is you, Clara. You and your documents." He raised the gun, his hand steadier now. Clara's muscles tensed, her knife ready. But before she could move, a shout echoed from the hall. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Wren froze, his eyes wide, as torch beams flooded the room. Clara dove behind a desk, her heart pounding, as officers stormed in, their voices sharp with commands. Wren fired, the shot wild, splintering wood above her head. Chaos erupted, shouts, footsteps, a second shot. Clara stayed low, crawling toward the transmitter, now at 98%. She had to protect it, had to ensure the veil's secrets reached Interpol. A hand grabbed her arm and she swung her knife, stopping short when she saw a familiar face. Inspector Elena Carver, a local officer Clara had vetted as clean during her recon. "Moreau, we've got Ren," Carver said, her voice urgent. "You're safe. Come with us." Clara hesitated, glancing at the transmitter 100%. The upload was complete. She nodded, slipping her knife away, and followed Carver out, leaving Ren cuffed and shouting about his rights. Outside, the campus was a circus. Reporters, police, students watching from the perimeter. Clara's earpiece crackled with Voss's voice. Evidence received. Veil operatives identified in 3 countries. "Good work, Moreau." But Clara wasn't celebrating. The legal case against Julian's crew had collapsed. Just as Ren predicted, their family's influence too strong. The harassment charges were downgraded to warnings, a slap on the wrist. But the veil was unraveling. Interpol's raids, triggered by Clara's documents, hit Saffron Holdings and its affiliates, freezing assets and exposing names. Ren was arrested, not for the veil but for attempted murder, his role as a keeper still hidden from the public. Clara boarded an unmarked van, her extraction team whisking her off campus as dawn broke. The media spun the shutdown as a security drill gone wrong. But whispers of the veil lingered, a ghost story for St. Aldrich students. Clara's cover was blown, her mission complete, but the cost was heavy. Her family was safe, but she'd never be just a student again. As the van sped toward London, she deleted the final message from the veil. "You've won nothing." She leaned back, exhausted but resolute. The veil was wounded, not dead, but Clara had struck the first blow. The university would reopen, but its secrets were hers now, and she'd carry them forever. The end.